Have you ever felt like your AI automation agency is hitting a ceiling? Maybe you're getting results, but it feels like something is blocking you from scaling faster. What if I told you that there is a single flaw holding you back, and once you identify it, growth becomes inevitable? And that's what we're going to be unlocking in today's video. Essentially, when I first started my AI automation agency a few months ago, it felt like I was constantly busy building systems, creating workflows, and trying to deliver results for clients. And as a person, I love to over deliver. So this was really compounded. But at the same time, no matter how much work I put into the whole agency, it felt like my revenue was always at the same level, pretty much there. Anyway, let's put it like that. So something really felt off. It's like I couldn't get to that next level. And then I was speaking with a friend who mentioned a podcast that he had just heard. And they spoke about the theory of constraints. And when I went and listened to this podcast, it wasn't necessarily a new idea, but applied to my specific situation, it completely transformed how I approach automation systems and even client work. Today, I want to break down this theory of constraints, specifically for AI automation agency. You'll learn how to identify the bottlenecks in your business, how to streamline your operations, and how to unlock predictable growth without working harder. And at the end of the day, that is what we all want, right? So the first thing is we'll discuss what the theory of constraints is and why it matters for your urgency. I'm going to speak about the biggest bottlenecks holding your business back, and I will give you the exact steps that you can follow in order to fix the bottlenecks and achieve predictable growth. So let's start with what is the theory of constraint. So the theory of constraint is a business principle that was developed by a guy or a doctor called Dr. Goldratt. And it states that every system has a single weakness or a constraint that determines the maximum capacity. So if we had to look at it, let's say this is the step one in your business. But then at some point, there is this weakness right here, or this constraint. So even if everything else is a huge pipeline, this part right here is holding you back. So let's actually imagine a pipeline. No matter how much water you pour in, the narrowest part will always limit the entire flow. And the same applies to your business, its processes, and everything you do in your business. So if you pour in water here, it will flow through. But then, at this stage, it will have to go slower, just because of the way this part is designed. Now, why does this matter for AI and automation agencies? In automation, the constraint could be a number of things. So it could be, let's go to a new screen. It could be number one. It could be lead generation, right? So that's one big thing that many agencies suffer from. It could be number two, client onboarding. So you have no problem getting leads to your business, but you suffer when it comes to onboarding those clients. It could be your capacity to deliver results. So delivering results, no matter what it is, it's all about that constraint in your business, right? So it's all about that part. If you don't identify this constraint, essentially you're optimizing the wrong areas. So even if, let's say you have client onboarding as your constraint, no matter how much you pour into lead generation, if onboarding is an issue, it will always hold your business back. As I said earlier, no matter how much water you're adding to your pipeline, unless you're fixing that bottleneck, you will still get stuck, or you will still be stuck. Now, the question might be, how do I identify the bottlenecks in my agency? And that is a great question. So, the first thing is you need to map out your entire workflow. And you do this visually. I think this is very important, at least for me. As a person, I'm a visual learner. I'm a visual person. So if I can see things visually, starting from lead generation to client retention, it makes it easier to conceptualize. For example, visualize your pipeline as lead generation, and then there's the discover call, then there's the proposal, then there's the client onboarding, the service delivery, the client follow-up. So do this and map each part. So maybe a better box than that, but so step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on and so forth. So map all this out visually. The second thing is to break down each stage into smaller tasks, and you list measurable outputs for each step. So let's say that we have lead generation here, right? As the first step. In this case, you might say, okay, what does lead generation actually mean? Maybe you have LinkedIn outreach, if that is your way of getting people. Maybe you have cold emails, which could be another way of getting people to know about you. Maybe you have content posting, which can be a third way to get people to know about your agency. So this is the second step. We're breaking down each system into its collective specific points. Then we're going to go to step 3, which is where we're going to collect data on each task's performance. In this case, we're going to collect a few important things. So we're going to collect data about different things. Number 1, we're going to collect data about any delays. So if we say this is when you can expect this thing, but we don't manage to deliver, that is one important data point. We're going to collect data about backlogs or areas where our capacity is strained. Like if only 5% of our leads respond to our cold outreach, this could be a real constraint, right? Then we're going to pinpoint the single task or step where the flow where the flow slows down the most, right? Because this is our bottleneck. So based on all this data we collect, we'll be able to say, for example, if we have too few sales calls being booked, then our lead generation strategy might be the constraint. And generally, we need to go back one step. So if we look at this, and the issue we're seeing is step 2, it generally is the effect rather than the problem. So it's a good idea to go back one step and see if we can pinpoint exactly what is happening in that previous step. Once we've done that, we verify that that is the constraint by testing small improvements to it. So if the system's outputs improve, you will then find that the constraint is actually what you're thinking that it is. For example, if you double your outreach efforts and you're tracking if more calls get booked, and they actually do, then you will find that that second step, which is the number of people on the calls, will get better. So by increasing the output here or the input here, you're getting a better output in that stage. So fix one thing and you verify whether that is the actual constraint. Now, let's speak about really fixing the constraint, because even this has a number of steps attached to it. So what I will say is that the first step is to focus all your resources on improving the identified constraint first. There's no point in going to other points of your business and trying to fix those unless they are the constraint. What you want to focus on is the thing that is causing you the most trouble. For example, create a more targeted message sequence if you are having trouble with getting people to respond, if that is your business constraint. If you're getting people to jump on calls, but you have trouble closing them, and you know that is the business constraint, focus on what you say during the call, because even a small percentage increase in that will have a massive effect on your bottom line. The second thing is to implement targeted solutions. For example, automations. With some of the processes, it's relatively easy to include automations and use tools like make.com, things like Airtable if you want, to ease that bottleneck. So it's not just about you doing more work. In fact, it shouldn't be. It should be about having systems that make sure that that constraint gets better, right? Let's say you can automate follow-up emails, you automate tracking responses. Anything you can do that involves systems is an investment in your business, both short and long term. The third thing that I would say is to make the process standard, and you document the improvements for consistency. At the end of the day, this is a scientific experiment. You're testing, you're tracking, and you're seeing whether the updates that you make result in a better business, in less constraints. So in this case, an example could be you create a standard operating procedure, an SOP, for outreach and for onboarding, whatever the constraint might be. Number 4 is monitoring. You want to ensure that the constraint has shifted or resolved, and you only can do this if you monitor the results. Say you want to increase the number of booked calls. Monitor the number of booked calls. In a way, it's very simple. It's just tracking the numbers, because the numbers never lie. So if you're doing more to increase the number of booked calls, you can compare to different periods and you see with your efforts, have these calls increased or not? So have you had more calls after making these adjustments? It's a relatively simple tracking type of thing to do. And then once you identify that you have fixed the issue, you can either repeat the process to make it even better, or what I would suggest doing is to repeat this process, but as a way of identifying this next constraint. So if you go back to the notebook here, let's say that before it was like this, right? So we had like that, and then we had like that. So now let's say that you have fixed the part in the middle. So compared to before, you don't have that big of a constraint right here, and things are flowing freely. And let's say you make even more effort, and over time, this becomes something like this. So now you have a much better pipeline, right? But let's say that over here, which could be your client fulfillment, is where the next bottleneck lies. So you repeat this whole process over and over again to now fix this part right here. So like that, you're always focusing on the 80-20 that gives you a better business. If, for example, your calls increase, but the conversions remain low, then it's time to focus on sales call optimization. So it's always about figuring out what that next thing is and removing that constraint. In a way, it's like the factory example, right? So it's not just about pipelines, it's also about factories. If you have a machine and the machine is slower than the rest, the entire line will slow down. And by fixing that one machine, your constraint, right? That is what is the slow machine. It will boost the entire system and the whole efficiency of the system. So applying this principle is what will get your agency to the next level. So my question to you is, what are the biggest constraints in your business and how are you going to identify and fix them? And the solution shouldn't be by working more. It should be by taking the right action or actions to identify these things, fixing them, and then moving to the next problem. So let me know in the comments below. And in the meantime, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. Also, check out the link in the description so you can see how I can help you move forward with your AI and automation, either business or implementing this stuff in your own business. I'll speak to you in the next video.